Joining us now, Congressman, 5th District, Virginia, Southwest Virginia area, South Side, Lynchburg, etc. He's got one of the biggest districts ground-wise in America, bigger than like states, Rhode Island and stuff. Tom Garrett with us now, Republican. Tom, good to have you with us.
Geez Louise, my state Senate district was bigger than Rhode Island. Come on, man.
I know Rhode Island's pretty small. Bigger than Delaware, I think. Bigger than a lot of stuff.
I think that the current district is bigger than New Jersey plus Vermont.
I grew up in New Jersey. That's a pretty big state. Going from Cape May to the Tappan Zee Bridge, take you 2.5 hours.
Is it not the Tappan Zee Bridge? Who knows?
Well, you can call it Tappan Zee. I'll call it Tappan Zee, but whatever it is. Anyway, it's way up there. Goes to upstate New York. Beautiful drive, though, up the Garden State Parkway, by the way. Now, Tom, I did the math, okay? In fact, well, I have to give credit to the boss. My wife spent the day yesterday after we were debating this tax cut on the air. She spent the day running tables. So let me just give you two numbers, okay, very quickly. This tax plan that's in the Senate right now, if it passes as it is, family of four, 60,000 income versus what they're paying now, no itemization, right? They're going to save $1,410. That's over $100 a month. $90,000 gross income, family of four, they're going to save $2,310 a month. That's not chump change. Why are the Democrats saying this is not a tax cut for the middle class when we run the numbers and it's all right there? Tell me what I'm missing.
Because they're lying. Because they're lying. Listen, if you want to simplify the tax code, you have to remove all these massive number of deductions. What we've done is we've daggone near doubled the standard deduction for individuals from $6,700 to $12,000, for families from $12,000 or to $24,000. And so if you lose a deduction because you're a veteran, if you lose a deduction on student loan interest or what have you, okay, subtract that from the money that we just put back in your wallet. So let's say that you're an individual filer. You get $5,300 more per year. You lose a deduction of $1,000. It's a net gain of $4,300 per year on the standard deduction alone. So, yes, we are taking away certain deductions. That's because we have now created a tax plan where, in reality, you could actually file on the front of a postcard.
Right.
And yes, you might lose particular deductions. However, you will gain so much in your individual deduction. And understand this, only the top 30% of wage earners itemize it all, that you will be able to then subtract the deduction that you lost from the money that you gain from the increased standard deduction and get a net increase. The CBO has come out, and they've said, look, there might be some increased cost to people on the lower end of the wage spectrum. When ABC News ran their story that said, hey, this is a tax increase on people below $30,000, no, it's not. Read the story. What it is actual people who actually pay taxes are paying less, and it reduces, in some instances, federal benefits. We're looking to circle back around and address this. So with a straight face, you can't say that people who actually are net taxpayers, not people who receive, but net taxpayers, don't get more money back every single month from this plan. And so there you go.
Well, I mean, if you're a married couple and you have no kids and you're making $30,000, which is not a lot of money, that's very tough to exist on that, but you're going to pay taxes on $6,000. You're going to pay 12% on $6,000, which is $720. That's going to be your tax bill. I mean, the math is simple. If you've got one child, you're going to pay nothing, right? Because you're going to take the $2,000
with kids making $30,000 a year is going to net darn near $1,000 more a year. I mean, essentially, her $720 is gone, and she pays a net zero.
Right, exactly.
So, you take candidly, if we could just fix the health care plan, which we could do if any single Democrat would listen to the sage advice of Barack Obama, who said there are real problems with the Affordable Care Act, or Bill Clinton, who said the Affordable Care Act is the craziest thing in the world, or Minnesota Democrat Governor Mark Dayton, who said the Affordable Care Act isn't affordable. If there were any Democrats who lifted a single finger or put in a single bill to address those problems, this wouldn't be the case at all. I mean, you'd have the savings all the way around. But yeah, I mean, this is, look, if you go to GDP Now on Google and look up the Atlanta Fed, where they calculate the projected GDP based on the current political rollings, essentially in Washington, you're going to see a current predicted GDP at like 3.6, 3.7%. If the average American voter understood what that meant, Trump's approval rating probably be at 70.
Right.
I mean, the growth we've seen in the last 2 quarters is unparalleled in the last 12 years. You haven't seen back-to-back quarters of over 3% GDP since there was a guy named Bush in the White House, and he's not my favorite. For gosh sakes, this economy is rolling. This tax plan is going to push it, make it roll faster, and the Democrats, at the expense of a political loss, will tell people stories about how they're taking away this deduction, therefore they're raising your taxes. Well, no. If you take away a particular deduction, but you create an even larger standard deduction, you're cutting people's taxes. Tell the whole story.
Well, they're lying. I mean, one thing I took exception to, I got an email yesterday, I guess everybody did, from Mark Warner blasting the plan. He was voting against it. And basically...
It's funny, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I did. And one of the funniest things in it, or I'm not sure if it's funny or what, but he was lamenting the CBO that said it would add $1.1 trillion to the debt over 10 years.
Now, what is that, 1/16th of what President Obama added in 8 years?
I mean, it's like, okay, so Senator, you've been there for 2 terms, okay, and a half. You've been there 14 years. Under Obama, the Democratic president, where you had a Democratic majority, the debt went from $8 trillion to $20 trillion. It doubled in a half. You voted for every single spending cap buster known to man. You voted for every single one of them. And so you had no problem going from $8 trillion to $20 trillion, but now you got a problem going to $21 trillion over 10 years, assuming no revenue growth, right?
Look,
it's mind-boggling.
Look, we need to balance our budget. We need to cut back spending, but this is a step in the right direction because this is going to grow the economy. If you read the exact same CBO report upon which Senator Warner based his email, the exact same CBO report, you will see an asterisk, an italicized speech essentially that says this doesn't account for any macroeconomic trends created by growth in the economy. Essentially, they presume that they'll cut taxes and there'll be no growth in the economy. Now, when Reagan did it, there was growth in the economy. When John F. Kennedy, Democrat, good president in Massachusetts, did it, there was growth in the economy. There's going to be growth in the economy. Again, the Atlanta Fed GDP Now calculator has our predicted GDP, if this thing passes, close to 4%. We haven't touched those numbers for a generation.
That's the bottom line here. You've not touched these. We've got to get this done. Let me respond here quickly to a text because I've figured this out. This is from Ben in Norfolk, who says, John, could you please ask Tom, and I can answer this myself. My kids are all gone and moved on and grown. I bought a house. I take the deductions off the interest, blah, 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 and now I can't do that. My wife and I, we make under $50,000. How will this affect me? Your tax, if this passes, Ben, your tax will be $3,120. That's what you're going to pay. So look at your taxes from last year, and you're going to pay $3,120 because you're going to pay 12% on $26,000. You have no other deductions. You're going to fill this out in 5 minutes. In order to take the deductions, your interest on your home would have to save you over $24,000, which is unlikely at an income of $50,000. You'd have to have a mansion.
It's almost unheard of.
Right.
I mean, it's
so
like
you're going to pay.
This person might exist, but we can't find them.
You're going to pay $3,120.
The first thing that happens to Ben is his individual deduction. I'm sorry, his standard deduction as a family, right? He and his wife file together, goes from $12,700 a year to $24,000 a year.
Right.
So unless his mortgage interest alone is over $11,300 a year, in other words, unless he's making less than $50,000 a year, living in a home that's $1 million, he's just got a tax cut.
Right.
Yes, he will lose a deduction.
Right.
His net tax bill will drop.
Right. So, Ben, you will pay, if this passes, if you make $50,000, family of two, you will pay in federal taxes $3,120, which is an effective rate of 6%. That's what you're going to pay. So if you paid, you just look at what you paid last year on the same income, and that's your comparison. I can do it in 5 minutes. Now, here's the good news. Think about how long it took you to file all the stuff, get the receipts, get accountants. Now you file it over the phone. I can file your taxes, Ben, in 20 seconds. Done. So these are the things that
one of the groups from whom I've heard great disdain for this tax bill is predictably tax attorneys and accountants.
Oh, they hate it.
They have a vested interest in a convoluted tax code that requires you to pay them money to file your taxes.
Right.
And I have literally, from their mouths to my ear, heard people say, "Oh wow, I mean this is really making it tough." On who? On you?
Right. No, I mean, look, you're 100% there. And to Ben's thing earlier, if you're itemizing, well, then you can't take the deduction. So that even the $12,000 goes away. So you get the exemptions, which is only $8,000. So likely you were paying higher than 6% or $3,120 in taxes.
Yeah, I mean, mathematically, it is probably possible to find a scenario, but it literally only 30% of the tax filing population itemizes.
And this is the thing. What we're trying to do is simplify the code, make it easier. Right now, 30% of people itemize. All the estimates say if this goes through, that'll get cut in half. So you get about 15% of people
I've heard
itemize.
Anything from 5% to 15%. So at least half, yeah. At
least half. So, and it could be other. Some estimates have said it'll go down to 5% from 30%. Because now, if you're married with a $24,000 deduction, you've got to say, do I pay interest or out-of-pocket health costs and interest that are over $24,000? Unlikely for the majority of people, unless you're in Mar-a-Lago or Beverly Hills or you own a McMansion in Fairfax.
Talking points,
right?
I mean, I've been called an elitist by someone whose father was a shipping magnate. Right, who went to the Malibu Preparatory Academy. I got $55,000 in student loans. I just moved apartments because I couldn't afford the one I was in. I am working class America. Believe it or not, I'm on the Obamacare exchanges. So, it's not about helping people with money. It's about helping people.
Congressman, let's get to all of these sexual harassment things going on. A lot of your colleagues in there are apparently playing grab ass. What is going on here?
I don't know, but I'll tell you this. 535 members of Congress. I believe there have been 230 some odd complaints in 17 years, settled with millions of tax dollars. Now, I understand the nature of a non-disclosure agreement, but I would love to know, at the very least, the individuals who have had multiple complaints. If you've had one complaint, certainly there's a chance that something happened by way of a misunderstanding or what have you. If you've had 5, where there's smoke, there's fire. In life, the golden rule always applies. Treat people like you'd want to be treated, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I can't wrap my brain around it. I don't even. I mean, my wife and I jokingly said, maybe we should start a class for people on how to respectfully ask someone out for a date. I mean, what world do we live in? But anyway.
Well, I think there's a difference between, look, as far as Al Franken is concerned, or Judge Roy Moore, whatever these allegations are, I believe that the voters of their state should decide whether or not they want them to represent them. It shouldn't be up to colleagues or Senate or somebody else. It should be up to their voters. They want Al to represent him? Fine. They don't? Fine. I think it's different, though, in the Conyers situation, because that is workplace abuse. Workplace. And that's our workplace. We pay the tax dollars on that. I mean, it's one thing to go groping at a fair, whatever. you've got to deal with that, and the voters should decide. And if it's illegal, you're going to get slapped with handcuffs, etc. But the Conyers situation, Congressman Garrett, I mean, that's in the workplace. These are staffers. Some of the stories that came out of that are pretty chilling for what this guy did to his staff. And
well, look, I mean, I think you make a really good point, and I've said this actually privately. Now I'll say it publicly. Prior to the 17th Amendment, the responsibility of selecting a member of the United States Senate lay with the state House because the founders knew that if we nationalized the election, that we would then lose the ability of states to have a voice in the issues that impacted those particular states. In other words, Wyoming has different needs than New York.
Right.
Connecticut has different needs than Alabama. And so the idea was that people in those states would make those decisions. Now, every single allegation I have heard against anyone is reprehensible. I think the differentiate between Conyers and Franken and Moore is a nuance, and I don't think you're wrong, but they're all reprehensible. Having said that, people are yelling at me to weigh in on Al Franken or Roy Moore or what have you. I'll say this, the allegations are absolutely reprehensible. If I lived in Alabama and some freshman congressman from Virginia told me who to vote for, I would resent it. If I lived in Minnesota and some freshman congressman from Virginia told me who to vote for, I would resent it. But let's get the facts out there. Let's clear the air, and let's let people in these particular states make the decision for themselves based on the values and needs of those states, because that's the way the system's supposed to work, right? So, again, I mean, whether John Conyers is an icon, in the words of Ms. Pelosi, is debatable depending upon your definition of icon. But every woman who goes to work in the morning has the right to come home in the evening not having been subject to unwanted sexual advances. Having said that, there's a process here. Let this thing play through. I would hope that the voters wouldn't send people who they deem to be guilty of these offenses to Washington. But, whether it's credible or not, whether it's plausible or not, this is up to the finder of fact, in this case the public, to determine. And in my opinion, is that these allegations are horrific. But who am I? I should, as a sitting member of Congress, I should have less sway on who wins the election in Minnesota or Alabama than a regular old person in Minnesota or Alabama.
I couldn't agree more. You are spot on with that. Thank you, Tom Garrett. We're out of time. Tom Garrett, Republican, Congressman, 5th District, Virginia. Thanks for being with us, Tom. Always a pleasure. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving.